Welcome to Driving to College for this special video on how higher education is responding to the COVID-19 or coronavirus outbreak. So there's a lot of conversation going on these days on every college campus, I would assume, about how is the best way for each individual school to respond to the coronavirus, which is now a pandemic according to the World Health Organization. So I know that on my campus, this is by far and away the most active conversation that we're having on the administrative level. And it seems like it changes every day as far as what we know, what we think we need to do, and what we are planning to do. And so I think that I live in a part of a country that so far my state only has 2 active cases of the COVID-19 virus. But I think the reality is if you do research and you listen, you realize that this thing is probably just getting started. And I would sure rather my campus and every campus be proactive instead of reactive on what to do. And I know if you're watching this video, you're also thinking about how to find the right college for your son or daughter. And perhaps you already have a child that's in college currently, and you're kind of wondering what is the best avenue for you to do as a parent for your child. So today we'll really focus on those of you that do have current students on a college campus, but I think there are some definite things you can learn about a school as you think about how they respond to an outbreak such as this. I should note early on here that I am reusing footage from Berea College. I'm not doing that in any way to imply that Berea has an outbreak of COVID-19 on their campus. Although I have heard recently that they have taken proactive steps and I believe they have canceled their semester and sent students home that could go home. And so I have to admit that I am really impressed with their quick work and their willingness to put things such as student safety and community safety above perhaps other interests, such as making sure that students have a great experience on campus. So good for Berea College, but I am not necessarily using this video as a way to highlight them negatively or positively. It's just a great set of video that I like, and it's ready to roll since I want to get this video out quickly because with this issue, time is of the essence. So I realized today that on my campus, we have a lot of work to do still about the first step, which is educating our community, our faculty, our staff, and our students about COVID-19 and what it is. I had a staff member today who is going out on medical leave for a pre-scheduled surgery who sent an announcement to some people, and there was some concern about whether or not she was going out because she had COVID-19. And I asked her to kind of update and make sure that people understood that she wasn't. So there we had a little bit of panic. We covered it. But her response was also interesting, and she kind of laughed and said, well, I'm the least likely person on campus to interact with somebody who's been out of the country. And I realized that was maybe a week or so ago, the common thought on COVID-19 was that it was a disease or virus that was in other countries and not really a problem in America unless you had interacted or yourself gone overseas to another country. But the reality now is that I think it's changed, and I realize that we need to keep educating our internal community that really anymore it seems like anybody could get the virus, and it's not simply don't interact with people who have been out of the country, don't go out of the country and you'll be okay. It's a changing and unfortunately growing situation, but I think there is a lot that we can do to keep things from getting out of hand and panicky, but also being conscious with our decisions so that we can help both our campuses and our culture and society in our country deal with a growing epidemic. And there's some definite things I think that we can do as institutions of higher education to keep students safe and to keep the disease through some choices that we make from spiking, at least as far as growth. I know that if you're watching the news in any way, you've probably heard of the social distancing plan, which is to keep away from, 6 feet or so away from anybody who's coughing or, exhibiting signs of what we might consider the cold. And so social distancing and with events being canceled, I know the NBA is talking about canceling fans at least at games. I know the NCAA tournament is probably talking about whether or not they allow fans to come. I think at this point they are still saying that, yeah, we'll have fans. But really, in places where it's impacted, they are doing away with large gatherings because that's where people come together and unfortunately have an opportunity to share this virus with each other. And college campuses are similar to that. They are small communities where often a significant number of students live in close proximity to each other. And so I think that we fit into that area that if we can keep from being these small petri dishes where the virus runs rampant from our students and then they spread it around, we can help out in that way to keep the virus from growing too fast. So let me walk you through a few things that I know are being discussed on several campuses and kind of the different thought processes or things that are being talked about as far as COVID-19 is concerned. And the first is awareness. So we want to make sure as campuses that our communities are aware of what's going on and that we're not doing that in such a way that is inciting panic, but yet is not essentially burying heads in the sand and hoping that somehow miraculously this thing just kind of fizzles out. And I think that the most important thing for awareness that I'm aware of or that I think of for my campus is appropriate information that goes out to students in kind of consistent, timely ways. And we want our outbound messaging on COVID-19 to be messaging that's based in fact and data. So we want to make sure that we are sending messages out that are true, that students can trust, and in no way will both underplay or overplay the impact. The next concern that we have would be one of student safety. Of course, no institute of higher education wants their students to become sick and get exposed to something that might impact their lives. And student safety, really, in many instances on most campuses, is the number one concern of so much that we do in the higher education community. So we are definitely talking about student safety and how can we maintain that during the outbreak and growth pattern of COVID-19. One of our concerns having to do with student safety is what might we do on my campus if somebody gets diagnosed or comes down with an active case of COVID-19. From what we understand, if you quarantine, you're supposed to quarantine each person in a situation where they have their own room and their own bathroom. And we have set aside residence halls that are rooms that are not being utilized right now as potential quarantine sites, but they do not all have their own individual bathroom. And a lot of campuses are in this situation. It's really hard on a college campus to find a whole bunch of individual room, individual bathroom situations. And then, the food situation where students come together in one or two or three or four kind of common eating areas is, again, not part of a quarantine plan. So really what we're talking about is that if we were to have an outbreak on our campus, would we be able to manage that in such a way that kept students safe? And I would guess that in the instance of Berea College that we're looking at again today, that was probably a big part of their thinking as well, that they probably didn't have the capacity. And so they were proactive and they wanted to send their students home before an outbreak might happen, which I really respect them for doing. And I think that it's smart to do it early. I think, obviously, if a college waits until they have an active case on campus, then you don't want to send students home to all their hometowns because then you are essentially sending the virus out to all sorts of hometowns carried by your students. So the best time to send them home is before there is any risk or concern of them carrying the virus. Of course, part of that would then, you'd have to think about students who are unable to go home, students who live in potentially, say, Italy or other countries that are shut down, obviously can't go home. But so might students who live in some of the cities where the virus has already become fairly active, such as Seattle or New York City, or quite frankly, most major cities seem to have at least an outbreak going on. So I think that there's a nice response somewhere in there to allow a student to stay on campus if it's safer for them on campus than it is at home. A school that I'm familiar with is Bluffton University, and I believe they sent out messaging today that they have taken kind of an in-between step where they are halting face-to-face classes. Students are welcome to go home for the semester, or at least until Easter, the end of Easter break, I believe, and do online learning or do their coursework through Zoom or YouTube Live or something like that. But the courses will continue. Students can choose to stay, and I believe they have yet to make a decision on athletic events. And so I think that Berea, for instance, has canceled the semester. Faculty are trying to figure out the best way to conclude the semester, if they can do some things online that would kind of teach out, or if necessary, they can give grades now. But I think they've also canceled athletic events at this point. And of course, if you've read, there are, the high profile schools that have made those decisions already. Harvard and Stanford. University of Washington probably is the largest school population wise that has made kind of a major decision to stop face-to-face coursework. And that number, it seems like every time every hour or two that I go on to Twitter or LinkedIn, I'll see an announcement of another school who is doing that, and my school is talking about different avenues as well. And so I think that one of the questions that does come up after student safety is one of academic quality and rigor. Not every school is ready or capable to turn all of their face-to-face teaching into online teaching, and to do that in a way that maintains quality. So I think that's a hard part for schools to think about, especially if students are going home. Not everybody goes to a home that has great internet capability. I'm sure there are students on every campus who go home to a home that doesn't have internet at all, or slow internet, if any. So I think that's part of the thinking. And unless a school is already significantly invested in online education, to take coursework that has been designed for face-to-face and just turn it into decent online or remote learning is really difficult. And so I think that comes into conversation. Is it worth continuing the semester in a way that's less than ideal? And I think another thing we're talking about is the final experience for some of your students. Is this what you want to be? Do we want to send them home? Obviously, if it's the safest thing to do, we want to do that. But I suppose there's a little bit of thinking that if we do that and then the virus somehow slows down, then what we've done is taken the last experience of our senior class and drastically changed it. Although in my mind, that conversation is far less important than our student safety. But it probably is something, at least in the back of my mind, I would weigh. But I personally would not allow that to sway me as far as what we want to do with students. The next thing is community safety. Many schools are in small towns with a limited capacity for their hospital or medical facilities. And so if a campus ends up with an outbreak and it spreads, it is possible that campus would consume all of the medical capacity for the town, leaving the rest of the community without as much help with the virus as they might want or need. And finally, for a lot of campuses, if you're in a town where there's a fairly heavy population of elderly people, I think it's probably safest to consider sending students to their hometowns before there's an outbreak, because we sure don't want to spread anything that starts at the college with younger people who at this point are less susceptible to either death or significant illness from the virus. We don't want to have it start with us and spread to an elderly population. So essentially, I think that colleges are right now thinking about long-term implications. Can we be institutions in our society that can help decrease the rapid expansion of COVID-19 or not? And I think when we can, it's our duty to do so. And so it'll be very interesting to see what different campuses in the middle of the country start to do as the number of cases moves from the east and west coast into the middle. And so I would encourage you to check websites. I know that most schools are posting on their websites quite rapidly some updates as to where they're at with decision making. If you have a student on campus, the other thing that I would encourage is that the student check their campus email. And I know that a lot of times students don't check email because it's like old-fashioned, but a lot of colleges still use their email as the main and official way to communicate. So make sure your child checks that. But the reality is, with this situation changing as rapidly it is, you'll want to find a way to get current information, and especially to have your students be very careful as they move into spring break. Spring break is the other big issue that we are talking about, what to do with students who leave campuses and travel all over the world and then return to campus and share their experiences with each other. So I think that is unfortunate timing, and I think that a lot of the proactive work that we as colleges can do has a lot to do with whether or not we address this before spring break, or if we hope that we are clean campuses post spring break. So those are essentially the factors that a lot of schools are looking at and thinking about as far as COVID-19. And I would encourage you, if you have a student at a school, to contact either the health office at that school or the student life office at that school if you have any questions and concerns. Again, thank you for watching the video. If you have anybody that you think this might appeal to, please share it with them. And again, in this instance, we're all hoping that everybody stays healthy and that at some point we can continue thinking about graduating from college, getting jobs, and moving on. But right now, the number one concern is campus safety and society safety. Thanks a lot. Enjoy the journey.